This is the Stine Seedcast. I'm your host, David Thompson. Join me as we visit with growers, agronomists, seed experts, and other industry professionals about seed, agronomy, and the business of farming. Hello. Today our guest on this special episode of the Seedcast is Stine President Myron Stine. Welcome back, Myron.
Thank you, David.
Well, today marks two significant milestones for the Seedcast. It's our 80th episode, and it's also the third anniversary of the podcast. And as some of you may recall, Myron was featured on our very first episode. So we figured it's only fitting to have him back again for this anniversary episode. Today he's going to discuss the 2024 season, challenges growers have faced, opportunities that lie ahead, and the feedback he's gotten on the performance of our Stine genetics. So let's get to it. Well, so Myron, tell us, how has this season been shaping up so far for Stine Seed?
Well, so it'll be nearly done as far as we're concerned, by the end of November. There's a lot of things you shore up after that, but it's been good. The ag economy hasn't been the best. It's at a bit of a low, but aside from that, growers are very anxious to still use the newer products. Growers are wanting to not plan for a disaster, so they want to look at every acre and do the best for every acre. And we've changed some of our strategy. We used to always be focused on just bringing good genetics out. Well, now we're focused on doing that and then adding the agronomy support to those genetics so that we can help that grower do the best they can on that acre.
Yeah, it's a good point, because even the best genetics are of little value if they're on the wrong acre or planted in the wrong way, right?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, we have a lot of versatility in our soybean lineup, for instance, where you don't have to do a lot to place it properly. Now, on the corn side, on the other hand, I don't care what corn hybrid it is, you need to do some, dot your I's and cross your T's and do the right thing to maximize its performance on your farm.
So as we sit here today, we're into harvest season. Just curious, you have a unique perspective because you get out a lot in the country and talk to a lot of our grower customers. So curious what you're hearing as far as, from the customers you visit with about performance of the products that they've had growing in the field here in 2024.
Well, it's hard to go in the Midwest and find a location that's not having good performance and good yields. In fact, it's blowing my mind. Like on the soybean side, we have a number of areas in the Midwest that are getting, I'm getting yield reports of fields that are averaging 70, 80, 90 bushel per acre, which is almost unheard of in some cases. So that's very widespread. And then on the corn side, corn generally is doing very, very well for most people. There are some dry pockets, but our corn lineup is what's impressed me the most. We put a bunch of new material into it this last season, and so we have so many new products doing very, very well. And then we have some older lines that, frankly, they're older, but they had a phenomenal year this year.
So talking, as I said, we're right now in the middle of harvest, and even though we may not want to think about it, planting season is going to be just around the corner. So as we look ahead, I guess, what are your expectations? Kind of what do you see coming as we head toward the 2025 planting season? And what are you telling the Stine team to be doing to be prepared for meeting those customer needs?
Well, in a year like this, I think that farmers second guess a lot of what they're doing. The commodity price is lower, and so they don't have as much margin of error like you do in a year where the price is higher. So we're trying to take extra time with the grower to make sure we're giving them the right advice on their acre and that they're trying to make the best decision on that acre, not wasting resources, not being careless, being precise. And our agronomy team, which we've been building up the last couple of years, has been the main pivotal force on that with our sales group.
So you talked about providing that additional service and providing that, value just beyond the genetics, but obviously also at our core, we are a genetics company. And so one of the things we talk a lot about is, kind of what we term the Stine advantage, right? The power of those genetics and how growers can benefit from the newest, latest genetics coming out of Stine. I guess any news on that front or things you want to talk about there?
Yeah, so a good way to illustrate that is, everybody thinks because our breeding programs license so much to the industry that they think that, everybody has Stine material. And what's interesting is if you look at our lineup today, we have 114 products in the catalog. That can go up or down depending on some of the new things we have. But 40 of those are only in the Stine bag. And so you have 40 of these products that you can only find at Stine, and many of those are brand new things, which frankly the rest of the soybean industry hasn't adopted to yet because they're brand new. And we always explain to people that we're coming out with the newest material, and the newest material is the highest yielding. And we know that every new generation of material we bring out, we average about a 2.4% bump in yield with that germplasm relative to the generation prior to that. So yeah, more than ever, we're able to demonstrate that using Stine brand soybeans, for instance, will, taking our lineup against anyone else's lineup is going to give you a yield edge, a tangible difference in how much you're going to make per acre.
Yeah, because you're right. Because I think within the industry, it's commonly said, a lot of the genetics out there on the soybean side are from Stine, and although that may or may not necessarily be untrue, kind of what you're saying is, but the latest stuff that is always kind of first in our bag because we turn those generations, we turn to new products, and those new products are where ultimately the advantage is in many cases because it's the newest, latest stuff.
Well, in the farmers, everyone assumes that a company is selling something that's going to perform. Well, that's a relative term. And the fact is on soybeans, I can show you, and our salespeople can show you, where if you're using our lineup against somebody else's, there's an edge to that. And in some cases, that edge may be your net profit, especially when the commodity price gets low like it is now. You can't afford to not have that extra 2% in performance across your entire farm. That could be your net profit for the year. And so it is not true when people just assume that all companies have performance, because they don't.
And I suppose that also makes it challenging when you're a grower in the instance where, like you said, maybe you're under a bit more pressure constraints now because of the markets being where they are. The tendency might be to retreat back and say, okay, one thing I don't want to do is try a new variety. And yet here we're talking about the fact that that's maybe the difference maker for your operation, especially in this time where margins are tight or, profit potential's tight. You need to get into that newest, latest set of material.
It's interesting. We have a tiered pricing strategy. So we take our older material and it's less expensive than our newer material. And in general, the farmers gravitate towards the newer material. I mean, and so most farmers understand that, but we like to talk about that because it's real.
So as you think about, obviously we're, as you said, well underway with the 2025 selling season. I guess curious as to what you see as your priorities or goals for Stine Seed Company in the 2025 season and beyond.
So it's real simple. We want to have more agronomy support for our genetics. We feel like our breeding programs do a phenomenal job of giving us the right genetics, but we want to bring more support for those genetics to our customers. And that's I'm giving you a very simple, basic answer, but that's harder to do, easier to say than to do. It's a big chore to do that and to do it right. But our vision is phenomenal agronomy support for our products, helping our growers make more money with our genetics on their acre.
Well, that kind of leads into my other question, which was kind of, as you're sitting here today, in the depths of the harvest season, what advice would you give growers as they're, maybe in the combine or just finishing harvest and looking to begin preparations for what will be the 2025 planting season? What do you advise them to do today?
Well, so they should consult with our Stine seed rep and then have an appointment set up with our Stine agronomist at the same time. And some growers, love to get really in depth on understanding what they need to be doing. And then some growers just want a little bit of basic knowledge, whatever that is. Sit down with our agronomist, take the time to gather information on our products, on how they work on your farm, and take their advice. They are exposed to these products day in and day out. We do a very, aside from the research group has a lot of data rolling out of there picking genetics, but our agronomy group takes those new genetics and they put them in a really robust strip row trial system, and they take notes on them on corn and beans all summer long. So they know those products through and through, and they can help our customers maximize the performance of those products on their acre.
Yeah, I was talking with Director of Agronomy Tom Larson on a previous episode, talking about the combination of the elite trials, which of course churns out this exceptional material, and then in concert with what they're doing on the agronomy side, which is sort of that fine tuning, right? To say we have a lot of really great products. Now let's fine tune it and figure out where that product fits, how it should be applied, and where it's going to be the most successful for growers. And I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity for us as an organization. So very exciting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, so again, this being our 80th episode, and, like I said, 3 years ago, you sat here with me. We did the very first episode of Seedcast. Do you remember that episode at all?
Oh my gosh, I'm trying not to remember that. But though, I got a couple questions for you, because you're always asking all the questions and putting everybody in the hot seat, and so tell me, how has this podcast helped Stine communicate with growers, and what kind of feedback have you received from listeners at this point?
Well, I think when we started, I remember the reason we started the project was because I think you and I had a conversation within the office there one day, and I left your office that day thinking, I wish that everybody could have been in the room and heard that sort of conversation, because it was very insightful. And we thought, how can we get those kind of conversations out into the open? And that kind of served as the motivation behind the Seedcast. Now, at the end of the day, we're working with our audience is kind of salespeople and growers and everybody. And I'm sometimes surprised as we get around and talk to growers who say it is a regular part of their listening experience, or other folks in the ag business. And so I don't know how you gauge the success of it, but I think there's so many great stories about who we are as an organization and the things that we do. I think it's been fun to be able to bring some of those stories to, again, either our own people who maybe aren't as familiar, or to our customers, and learn more about us as a company.
I certainly I get a lot of feedback from a lot of different people. I had someone in California bring up that they listened to your podcast. So
awesome.
So looking back, from the first episode to now, how has this podcast evolved in its content and impact when you look at that?
I think the content has evolved in the sense that we have a lot of knowledge and a lot of information here internally. We have so many super knowledgeable people within our organization, but probably one of the things I've learned as we've gone through this journey is we don't have all the answers, right? And so there are times where it makes sense to go outside and talk to folks. We've had folks from the universities, land-grant universities. We have folks from government. We've had folks who just are voices within the agriculture sector in general. And I think those are important conversations for us to have too. I mean, we're obviously very focused on what we do, and that's delivering really great corn and soybean genetics. But I think what I've learned is there's more to that row crop production system than just the genetics. And there's value for us to have some of those conversations that maybe aren't directly related to the genetic side of things. And as to what impact they have, I guess I don't know. I hope that it's somewhat entertaining to folks and informational to a lot of them. I would hope, because I've been very fortunate over the time I've been here. I've always said I get the chance to tell one of the greatest stories in agriculture. So hopefully we're getting to tell those stories in a way that is interesting to folks.
I like your comment that there's a lot of people in our organization that we don't, we take them for granted. We just don't understand that there's a wealth of knowledge there, and being able to take those people and get them on the mic here to talk about what they do. I think that's good for your listener. That's good for our customer. There's a number of things our customer can take out of that. So
honestly, the hardest thing I think with some of our internal folks is they don't see what they do as extraordinary.
Yeah.
So when we say to them, "Hey, this is a pretty interesting story. What do would you like to talk about?" They say, "Oh no, you don't want to hear from me. It's just this is what we do. No big deal." And it's only when you draw that out they realize, oh, so you mean it's not this way across the whole industry. Not everybody's doing 1.4 million plots a year, or not everybody's, so they're just going about their work, and they don't realize kind of the impact that has on the organization or on the products that go ultimately to our customers.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we do and nobody else does that.
Yeah.
Yeah, my father is quite... he's an innovator. He is. It's innovation. As I get older, I realize he is so very innovative. So what do you envision for the future of the Stine Seedcast as it continues to grow?
I just hope we can continue to find those great stories. There's as the organization continues to evolve, it just seems like every year there's new and interesting things happening. So it just doesn't feel like there's any shortage of things to cover. Some of the basics are always going to be there. We talk a lot about the yield-driven model and how our drive to create these great genetics. But then there's all these pieces that get added to that about how we are doing that so much better than we used to. One of the things last year that I remember so vividly is talking about like using drones to measure maturity in the elite trials. And why does that matter? Well, because that means you can do so many more plots, right? It used to be the limit to your imagination, or the limit to what you could do was just the physical hours in the day. But if technology can help you get around that, well, now how much more can you do, right? And so I think we'll continue to talk about those ways that we just continue to lead the industry forward and how we maintain that commanding lead that we have. And hopefully we can communicate why that's important to growers to consider that. Because here again, it's one thing to lead the industry, but it's another to continue to lead the industry over decade after decade after decade, even despite all the innovation and all the technology that happens. I think it's pretty impressive that we command that lead that we have today.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, awesome. I was not used to being the one answering questions, but thanks for.
Yeah, I wish I had some really, really hard ones, because I'm sure there's people that have been in this seat and just tortured by Mr. David Thompson.
Well, that's probably true, but I'm glad that they're not here to speak for that. So.
Yeah.
Well, as always, Myron, it's great to have you on the Seedcast and here celebrating with us on big number 80. So thanks for the first episode. Thanks for the 80th episode and all the ones in between. Appreciate everything you do for us and for Stine Seed Company. Thanks for being on.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure. I enjoyed every bit of it.
Thank you for listening to the Stine Seedcast. To never miss an episode, subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice. Have a question for our experts? Email asktheseedcast@stineseed.com to have your questions answered on a future episode. To learn more about Stine Seed Company, visit stineseed.com. And remember, Stine has yield.